Dollar. DonleyAuctions.com.
I love America. I love the Constitution. I love the First Amendment. I want to carry and all else. I love it, property. And let me tell you something. If you care about your country, read Ludwig von Mises and the 6 lessons of the Austrian Economic School, motherfuckers.
From the streets of Melrose Park to the trading floor of the Merc, he's fought for every dollar he's ever earned. And now, with personal liberty and our system of capitalism under assault in America, he's here to seize back our rights from the government. With a cigar in one hand and a copy of the Declaration of Independence in the other, he's Shaun Thompson. And this is the Shaun Thompson Show.
Some folks are born made to wave the flag. Ooh, they're red.
You know what gets lost every time we talk to our next guest? And I think when anybody does, I don't think they give his work history and his expertise enough credit. Because it's credit enough to say he's the founder of WirePoints, which is a fantastic organization, wirepoints.org, talking about all things really about finance in Illinois. But when you are understanding who the founder is, I think it's important to put that in perspective. He originated and managed venture capital, but that was after many, many years of practicing law with an expertise in debt, transactions, turnarounds, bankruptcy, venture capital. And prior to that, he worked for 3 different law firms, all very, very good law firms, serving as outside general counsel to the Illinois Development Finance Authority. I didn't know there was one of those. And if there was, I didn't think they knew how to read. Well, that must have been what they forgot to do after Mark Glennon left and became the founder of WirePoints. Mark Glennon, this isn't business. This is bankruptcy.
Shaun, thanks for having me. Yeah, that's a interesting option is bankruptcy. You know, at least for Chicago Public Schools, I've long thought that that's the nuclear option that we ought to be looking at. But you know, the state will have none of it, of course, and they have to authorize it.
Well, the other thing too is that the state's been captured. You know, the most amazing reality is that it's undeniable now. These accusations that I'm making of the state being captured, the Chicago Democrat mafia in control, nullifying the rest of the state, ignoring not just the 33 counties that voted for secession, but the 7 who are moving to do the same. But when you look at Springfield and you look at the players, Kwame Raoul, bald and stupid as I like to call him, some call him lawyer, and you look at Chris Welch, who looks a lot like Cecil, the turtle who used to beat Bugs Bunny in the early 40s, a scoundrel embroiled in a scandal after scandal after scandal. J.B. Pritzker, the so-called governor, on how many hours of FBI tape with the convicted Rod Blagojevich. This is really a Chicago mafia state now. It just is, and it has been. But it always is about the money. So I'm curious about something. When you see that Chicago Public Schools admitted that they were $250 million and now have to admit it's $1 billion because they're pretending all of a sudden $730 million just jumped out at them, who's been the one giving them this money, and what is the interest rate that they've been paid? Because ultimately, people who loan money to these entities, it's incumbent on them to do the due diligence to figure out exactly the financial liability and responsibility. The notion that they could come out and take $250 million and turn it into $1 billion, and all it does is make a news story, I find that offensive. But I have an IQ over 60. What do you think about it?
Well, yeah, that's a pretty small part of the picture. Of course, this new budget is almost $10 billion. And your question, who gave them the money? Well, what did they do with the money? They hired 9,000 additional employees with that COVID money. You know, so now they're talking about some layoffs, many of which will be rehired. You know, it's all silly. The big long-term problems remain. The short-term problem is a mess. You know, still to be determined. They won't have a finalized budget until the end of July or something. But as to your question about what they're paying, remember they are junk rated. So I don't know offhand what the blended actual rate they're paying is for new borrowing, but the pension debt was just really just like bonded debt, you know, is accruing at basically 7% a year. That's the assumed rate of return, which if they don't hit, that's what it accrues at. And they're paying a penalty rate on their bonds, probably something around 6%.
So, I mean, that's, and you know, when you realize what the money is and you look at the breakdown, it's ghettonomics, as I like to call it. but it's barely paying the interest, you're never touching the principal. And that's why the problems are so pronounced, are so undeniable, and the numbers are astronomical. Because when you're junk rated, correct me if I'm wrong, is that rate fixed or does it fluctuate? When you take a junk rated loan as a municipality, is the rate locked in or does it fluctuate with the market? Because that's the kind of thing that'll kill you and make hundreds of millions of dollars jump out of nowhere, won't it?
It's locked in. To my knowledge, they don't have any floating rate loans. However, when they go back to borrow again, that's when it hits them. And oftentimes these bonds, as they come due, are refunded. So, it's the same thing. Basically, you got to pay that new rate. It's also a problem because they continue to rely on sources of revenue that are not renewable. The new budget, we're not sure how much TIF money they're going to get there. It's at least $200 million. They've typically gotten $400, $600 million. That's, rating another fund that's not a renewable source. So it goes on and on and on.
And I thought the revenue from dope and gambling was going to bail them out, but what they never factored is you're just counting welfare money in the first place. The vast majority of people who are dumb enough to partake in either are wards of the state. That's another interesting reality, the amount of wards of the state. And when I saw these stores close, these grocery stores, what are they called? Banana something, Save-A-Lot. Over 50% of the revenue of these stores, over 50% are food stamps. When you look at the food stamp program, I don't think most Illinoisans or people understand how this works. It's a real scandal, in my opinion. What I mean by that is there are 2 million people, give or take, on food stamps in Illinois. 2 million. The federal government pays all of that. The state contributes nothing. So when we talk about this money just for Illinois, the annual cost to the federal government for Illinois, and this is on last year's numbers, is $4.5 billion. That's $350 million a month. That's injected into this arena, this industry, from federal money. So to see stores that operate on this money, which is outside money and the closest they're going to get to real money, outside of state welfare recycling itself, like video gambling and dope. It's a mirror. It's amazing that these stores closed, but it goes to show you, I don't believe it was used for food. I think the vast majority of that money, because I'm from a neighborhood where you got 50 cents on the dollar for that stuff. Nobody used it. You'd turn it in. Somebody would buy it. They would cash in. It was like a scam before the Somalians got here. Do we know if that $4.5 billion, which in theory should not only prevent any grocery store from closing, but arguably have a booming food distribution market, do we know how much of that $4.5 billion is stolen in Illinois of what is supposedly SNAP benefits?
Not really. Chicago has, of course, violated the federal guidelines on error rates in this. That's part of the reason they're getting treated more strictly by the federal government. And who knows whether that error rate is calculated properly, but whatever the benchmark is for it, we're worse than the other states. Most other states were worse than. And remember, these people weren't just thrown off of food stamps, too. The primary change in the federal law was simply a work requirement, and it's a pretty lenient work requirement.
And it's a citizen requirement. See, that's the part where they really steal the money. And by the way, just to give everybody in the loop, you and I know it, but the so-called error rate in Illinois is 14.6% that they admit to. So just think about that. You've got what, professionals? Who exactly is responsible for the error? Some unnamed moron getting a check and a pension? 14.6% error rate. That's not an error rate. That's bankruptcy. What business could you misappropriate 14.6% of your revenue or your liabilities and stay in business? Yet they admit to 14.6. It's been as high as 19%. So that alone, they can't do the simplest of things. You can't even get the welfare right.
Yeah, expert in artificial intelligence told me that the beauty of it from his perspective is that if you want to use it properly, it can entirely eliminate mass fraud like this in all kinds of programs, public sector and the private sector. And because it can scour the data up and down for hints about fraud of all kinds. And of course, the government isn't doing anything to implement this. They instead are passing all kinds of rules to restrict its use and make it difficult or impossible for government to use it.
Well, in a sanctuary city, in a sanctuary state, during COVID, what was the total amount of money COVID brought to Illinois and Chicago? It's a staggering sum, isn't it?
Yeah, it's like $20 billion, I think. It depends whether you include the money that went to the private sector, but a lot of that ended up back with the government through taxes and everything. So it's a staggering amount. Yeah.
And here's the other thing too, Mark. Numbers get thrown around so much, people forget a billion is 1,000 million. And you get the kind of numbers here where you're billion this, billion that, billion this. Is Illinois, when it gives us the liabilities, are they giving us the total liabilities? Are they including the pension debt, or has that been sequestered? As we now know, so much of the CPS debt was hidden from the light of day in the liability column. Do we know full out?
Not in the budgets that you always see. This is the primary problem with state budgets, is that they are cash based. So if you borrow money, they count that as if it's income. And if the pension debt rises, that loss is not reflected on budgets. You have to look at, you should be doing a accrual-based projection, and that just isn't used in government budgets. So it's fundamentally dishonest. It's not the way, and rating other accounts. The state has done this again. They've rated the road fund. Chicago does it routinely. The CPS is doing it with rating the TIF funds. But, if you have to dig into your kid's piggy bank or something, or take it out of one of your retirement account to pay today's bills, would you say fairly that you're balancing your budget? I don't think that makes a common sense definition, but that's what they do.
Well, that's the ghettonomics. But I want to say something that you said, and you and I know it because we know it. But there are people listening all around the country and the world now that aren't as versed in the verbiage that we are. And what you just said to me is something that Enron should have done. You said that if they borrow money and it's cash based, if there are projections on borrowed money, that they, meaning the state, the Democrats, they are counting borrowed money and money that is about to be borrowed as revenue. Is that what you said?
Exactly right. If borrowed money counts as revenue in the budgets.
So if we're going broke, all we got to do is get more credit cards, and we could count that towards income when we apply for new credit cards? I mean, that's what they're doing. These thieving, lying morons. I sometimes I don't know if I let that out or it just stays in my head. But that's in essence what they're doing. So if Visa gives me a credit card for $20,000, and then I apply to Discover, and I up my income by $20,000, and then I apply for Amex, and I up my credit by $50,000, and then I apply for Visa, and I up my credit card for $100,000. Am I going to get that, or am I going to go to prison for financial fraud?
Yeah. We say they're stupid. They figure this out and they get away with it. So they got to have.
I guess we're the idiots.
Yeah. Yep.
Well, that's a reality check there, and the money that's come in. Well, something has to explain the 77 new taxes in all of the budgets that J.B. Pritzker passed. And in this last one, my brief understanding, is that there are $800 million in tax increases. So will that come ticky-tack and be reported on by these imbeciles pretending to be media, none of whom could follow the conversation you and I just had? Like the tolls going up 45 cents per car, let alone who knows what it's going to be for truck. And how much money have they robbed from that fund, of which they really don't disclose how much money they have in that, do they? They kind of sequester their revenue. So they do what a pimp would do to the hookers when he tells them how much money you have in the pocket. They take the money they don't want the hookers to know and they put it in the back pocket. Is that what Illinois does in the road system? Because I just drove here and I went down. I'm in the ghetto, and I always am a little edgy when I'm here. And I took North Avenue to 53, to go through some of the old areas. I saw a lot of road construction, a lot of equipment. I didn't see one fracking worker from Melrose Park all the way through to North Lake. I saw all road constructions, not one worker. All of that money and all those obligations and all of those contracts, That's the department that's the same one raising the tolls, correct?
Well, they've commingled the money. You're right. They have raided that road fund, and the thing that I'm scratching my head over is, remember, they passed a constitutional amendment a few years ago that made it a constitutional obligation to use the road fund money only for the road fund, but they, for roads. Yeah. But they took it out and used it for the general budget this year, some of it, and nobody squeals about it.
Yeah. Well, the pimp told Trixie he'd stop going off-track betting. What are you going to do about it? I mean, it's really, at this point, the rules are there are no rules. Who's going to enforce the rules? The same judge that was caught on Facebook calling Trump Hitler? Right? I mean, this is why when I know how smart you are. When you're doing all this, what do you think to yourself? Do you think I got to tell my kids get the hell out of here before it turns into some dystopian future where everybody's Will Smith in that movie with the zombies? Because if you're still voting Democrat, you're a fracking zombie. At this point, if you're still voting for these Democrats, you're a zombie, aren't you?
Absolutely. I really just, it's hard to understand why the public hasn't woken up about this despite
it lit torches.
Despite knowing part of it, which is that the media covers up so badly for him. That's one of our fundamental problems, and the Democrats played the political game so well compared to the Republicans. And Donald Trump's not popular, and there's other issues I know, but I just don't get it because this is going on for so long, and the culprits are so obvious.
So I've come to a conclusion, and it was today. So I want to share it with you because I have to watch all these stories, and it's harder for me to watch the propaganda coming out of Chicago from Chicago. For some reason, I find it harder. So I have to do it, and I have to pay more attention. So I was paying attention to a story I want your take on. Hold on.
Cook County hasn't been able to perform a basic function of government on time in quite some time. We're talking about sending out property tax bills. County Board President Tony Preckwinkle promised the problem was fixed back in March.
We can move forward now. We've got the bills out on time, and they'll be out on time going forward.
But see, now that, you hear it. You and I just hear that. But I watch that, and I have come to a conclusion of how they get away with it, because I've noticed this over my lifetime. And, I'm going to tell you right now, Mark, I'm a jerk. I'm not like you. I'm a total Melrose Park punk jerk. Punch in the face rather than have a good time. I admit it. And the reason is I say what comes to my mind. So for years, I've been watching these Democrats as they, Mark, are getting uglier and uglier and uglier. And what I noticed about Tony Preckwinkle, it is truly a horrific ass face. And when it starts to talk, you just don't even listen to the words. You just want it to end. And the only reason you can get through a sentence of these fraud, lies, misappropriation, and malpractice of government is because they're ugly. I think being ugly as a Democrat is how they get away with it. What do you think?
Maybe they do get sympathy, but that late collection of the tax bills, that's just absolutely third world incompetence. This is, I think, the third year that we've had this. I mean, and this is not willful, and they're just because they love taxes. They want the money, of course. They're just too stupid to get a software program that will work to collect the tax bill. It's not. I just don't get it. It's.
So I got family. And they're getting started and all the rest. So I abandon everything. Here, just take it. Right, take it. I don't give it. So to watch the things come, the bills come in, the taxes. I'm in the real estate business, and you look at these assets, and you look at the taxes. There are guys that have had their tax bill double in 3 years on property that they cannot get rid of for a multitude of reasons, least of which is not they can't afford to get out of a mortgage they might have got at 3%, but they can't afford to take the haircut once they have to pay the taxes on taxes. I mean, it is a death spiral, Mark. And just from a financial standpoint, you, for all those years working as a venture capitalist, who's going to buy the real estate? I'm serious. Who's going to buy it except the people who just have to keep exchanging it amongst each other? There's no growth. There's no entities coming to rescue you. How long do you give it? How long do you give it?
I won't put a time on that because the that's the nature of insolvency. You don't know when it's going to happen, whether it's just going to be a slow bleed out or whether there'll be one big pop, which sometimes there is. But I wish people out there would remember too that on that tax issue, the commercial property rates are in Cook County are 3 times those crazy tax rates that you're paying on your residence. So, imagine that you're trying to build an apartment building and you're going to have this perpetuity mortgage in front of you and your lender and everybody else.
No one's going to touch it.
That's right. That's why you get no housing construction, and that's why rents are soaring here. And, everybody's getting priced out of the rental market.
How about how they attack the commercial real estate? All the idiots. Oh, well, this guy's getting he went to court and he had the value lowered and he's paying less taxes. The properties, the commercial properties in the Loop are selling at 84% less than they did 10 years ago. What do you want them to do? You want them to pay on a price that doesn't exist? I mean, the economic ignorance of the Chicago Democrat is the real issue at hand, isn't it?
Yeah.
Mark Glennon, you are my favorite lawyer. And, I don't like lawyers. I got about 10% I like. I can't get over what you did with yourself. I'm so proud of you. But go ahead.
Well, I got to tell you, you talk about how tough guys people were in Melrose Park. I went to high school in Chicago Heights. There were some pretty tough guys there.
Oh,
too,
yeah.
Yeah.
You know the difference between Chicago Heights and Melrose Park?
No.
We went looking for you. Thank you very much, Mark Glennon. Appreciate it. We'll be back with your calls and comments.
This is the Shaun Thompson Show, where Democrats are always wrong, Republicans are seldom right, and politics